Welcome to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee being held today, the 8th of June 2022. This meeting is being webcast with the exception of any business that the Cabinet resolves to exclude the press and that the Governance and Audit Committee resolves to exclude the press and public because of the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by the Local Government Act 1972. Can I just ask if there are any apologies? The first item of business for the committee is to elect a chair. Members will be aware that under the provisions of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, the chair of the committee can only be one of the independent lay members of the committee. And those members are Mr. Paul Witham, Mr. Nigel Rudd and Mr. Dave Stewart. The process that we'll need to go through is that I will need a nomination for chair of the committee.
Want me to nominate David Stewart?
That's very kind, thank you. And can we have a second?
Nominate, yes, seconded Dave Stewart.
Okay. Any other nominations? Okay, in the absence of any other nominations, then Mr. Dave Stewart is elected as chair of the committee. I'd just like to.
Good morning, everyone. I'm David Stewart. Thank you for coming here today. Welcome all the other members of the committee, all the officers, and presumably Audit Wales colleagues present as well. So I should say, as far as being wanted to stand as chair, I think it's a case of rather than me stepping forward, I think the other two lay members stood back. So thank you for your nomination. We'll carry on with the agenda if that's all right. And I think the next item on the agenda is the appointment of the vice chair, to appoint a vice chair of the Governance and Audit Committee for the ensuing year.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The provisions of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021 do not restrict the appointment of vice chair to lay members. So any member of the committee can be elected as vice chair, provided that they're not also a member of the council's cabinet or an assistant to the executive, and there are no cabinet members who are members of this committee. So what we would be looking for, Chair, is nomination for a member of the committee to be vice chair.
Could I propose Councillor Hugh Evans if he fancies the job?
I suppose we have a second.
I don't
know.
Can I, Chairman? Can I just intervene, please?
Yeah.
Come in.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ellie, for the proposal, but I prefer not to be nominated at this point. Thank you for that, Ellie.
All right. Okay. It was just an idea, and because we're not there in the room, I just thought I'd move the meeting on, sort of thing. Okay.
Good try, Ellie.
Do we have any other nominations as chair? Chair, sorry.
If there are no other nominations for the position of vice chair, and we don't have full attendance by elected members of the committee, then it is possible for the committee to defer the election of vice chair to their next meeting. So in the absence of any nominations, would members be content to proceed in that way?
Sorry, who had the hand up? Sorry, Nigel Rudd. Sorry, Nigel.
Chair, I was just supporting the motion. I didn't wish to intervene.
Is everybody in favour of deferring the nomination of the Vice Chair until the next meeting? Do we need a show of hands for that? Okay, thank you. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is any declaration of interest. Members to declare any personal or prejudicial interests in any business identified to be considered at this meeting.
Members will be aware of the requirement under the Council's Code of Conduct to declare any personal or prejudicial interest in respect of any business to be considered at today's meeting. Such interest should be declared now, or as soon as the councillor affected becomes aware that they have a personal or prejudicial interest in today's business. All members declaring an interest are required to state clearly what the interest is and to advise whether it's a personal interest or a personal and prejudicial interest as defined in the Code of Conduct. Any member declaring a prejudicial interest is required to leave the meeting for the duration of the business and can take no part in the proceedings. Members with a personal interest only may take part in the debate and any vote. If a personal or personal and prejudicial interest is declared today that has not previously been disclosed and recorded, the councillor concerned will be required to complete and sign a declaration of interest form, which is available either online or from committee support staff for those who are present in the chamber.
Sorry, do we have any declarations of interest? No? No. Okay, thank you. Next item is agenda item 5, urgent matters, notice of items which, in the opinion of the chair, should be considered at the meeting as a matter of urgency pursuant to section 100B4 of the Local Government Act 1972. Obviously, since no one's made me aware of it in the last 2 minutes, so I take it that's the answer to that is no, but if I stand to be corrected.
I can confirm, Chair, that there are no urgent matters for consideration by the committee.
Thank you. And so to agenda item 6, the minutes of the previous meeting. Members, what I intend to do, if that's all right, is rather than go through every line, just call out every page, and if there's anything that you want to draw attention to, you shout out that particular item on that page, if that's all right with everyone. So looking through the minutes of the last meeting, which was the 16th of March, page 7. Page 8.
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
I did say to Gary yesterday that I would offer support and assistance in relation to previous meetings, the previous financial year and the previous term of office, because I'm very conscious that there are hardly any members now, elected members and otherwise, who were actually here at this meeting, or indeed in the last financial year, or indeed in previous council terms. So not being an awkward cuss, but just helping people to catch up. Top of page 8, there is reference to internal audit follow-up, project management of Queen's Building. Members asked if the report presented to Cabinet was on Queen's Building or contingency. The reason for raising this is that pre-COVID, which seems an awful long time ago, a report was called for by this committee on contingency by the former councillor Martin Holland, vice chair at the time, and it seemed to get lost. I'm just raising that as an area of concern to this committee some time ago, but no, I don't recall it ever actually coming here. If you like, it's a matter arising.
Thank you, Paul.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I've just been advised that there is a report due in respect of the follow-up of the project management of Queen's Building Rail to come to the September meeting.
But excuse me, Gary, will that include reference to contingency, or is that a separate issue? I I vaguely remember that it was a separate issue.
I'll consult with audit colleagues, and okay. If it's not to be included in that report, then we can ask them to bring a separate report.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on page 8? Sorry.
Yeah, Chair, yeah, I'll have a look at the reports. Apologies, I've only just come back to audit in April this year, so I'll have a look at the Queen's Building audit and follow up and let you know at the next meeting when we'll be bringing it back, because obviously September is due.
Steve Gadd, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm Steve Gadd, Head of Finance and Property, in case you don't know who I am. Paul's right, actually, that they are two separate reports or two separate discussion items. The Queen's Building, it was a specific audit report, and that's what needs to come back to this report. Obviously, that involves discussion of the contingency to do with the Queen's Buildings. There was a separate request for a report pre-COVID that was around the general capital project contingencies and the methodology around coming up with those contingencies. Obviously, a lot has changed, especially the last 6 months with the level of inflation. But that was actually parked as part of the review of the forward work programme in the September when the Governance and Audit Committee reconvened, and it had a lot of catching up to do. So that report was agreed by Governance and Audit Committee not to come. Now, obviously, you can request that again, and I can bring a report on the capital programme and how that's budgeted for and contingencies to a future meeting. I would suggest sometime in the autumn, not September, because of the workload on finance and getting the final statement of accounts ready to the Governance and Audit Committee, but it can certainly be put on the forward work programme if that's what the committee wants. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. That sounds a good way of proceeding.
Thank you.
Chair.
Any other comments on that from members of the committee? No. Thank you. Okay, going on. I should say I'm not used to the technology. I'll try to look for hands up there, but Gary, give me a shout or a kick if I miss anything, please. Thank you. Okay, going on from onto page 9 of the minutes. Anything? Page 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
Page 13. Right at the top, talking about housing repairs and rechargeable works. I was just wondering whether there was any progress in following that up.
Presumably it's based on the last sentence. Members heard the department was going to undertake an assessment to ascertain the loss of revenue from not recharging tenants. So I think you're asking, has that been done?
That's right.
Yeah. Can an officer respond to that? Or?
Yeah, apologies again. Obviously, only being posted 2 months again, so I'll check that one and bring it back to the next committee if that's okay.
Thank you. Anything else on page 13? And page 14? Page 15?
Page 14, Chair.
Yes, Paul.
At the bottom, 2 things. Under item 12 from the minutes, there was reference to, as you can see in the second paragraph, the Chief Internal Auditor suggested an additional line for regular updates on the commissioning older people's care home placements be included as an ongoing update on the forward work programme. I don't think it has. So can it be included?
Yes,
please.
Yeah.
And the second one was that there is an information audit Wales report. Two aspects of that. I can't remember from March what that report was about, and it doesn't say in the minutes what it was about. And then secondly, it says there's an action plan response scheduled for the June meeting, which is today. So given that we've got another 2 Audit Wales information reports, first of all, I'd like the minutes to make sure that they do identify which Audit Wales report we're talking about. And then secondly, are we overdue an action plan response as indicated? Thank you.
I'm slightly lost there. Which item in the minutes was that?
13, sorry.
30, oh, sorry, right, okay. Okay. So the question is, I understand it, is there an action plan overdue from that? So that would be from who?
I think
the item that Paul's referring to is an Audit Wales report on delivering sustained performance improvement. That was the information report. As I understand it, the corporate self-assessment will refer to that, and I think the annual governance statement report also refers to that. But I can check again with audit colleagues whether or not there's a separate response report to come in respect of that.
Yes, so.
Okay, Gary, but I just think the minutes need to say what that report was.
I agree. I agree.
Sorry.
Actually, they're not correct.
No, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
For my benefit, could you just tell me who you are, please? Sorry.
Hi, I'm Gwilym Berry from Audit Wales.
Yeah.
I've taken over from Dave Wilson, who's retired, lucky person. That action plan has been produced by the council, so it is available. And normally action plans come to this committee, but it has been produced because I've seen it. It does exist. It has been, the work has been done by officers.
Thanks, Gwilym. Is that okay, Paul, with you? Yeah. Okay. Any other points from members on the minutes? Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Do you want to move that they are a correct record?
Yes.
Happy to do that?
I'd like to propose.
And I'll
Thank you.
second. Ellie and I were both present.
Yeah.
All in favour?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I should at this point welcome Gwilym. I didn't know your name, so I think I've crossed you in a previous existence somewhere, crossed with you in a previous existence, not crossed you. And it's I should welcome Bob as well. I think I didn't realise this is your first meeting as Chief Internal Auditor, is it?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be gentle. Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 7, the Council Performance Self-Assessment 2021 to 2022, which is pages 17 to 152 in the pack. We're to receive a report on the Council Performance Self-Assessment. So is an officer going to present this?
The item will be introduced by Councillor Gwyneth Ellis, who is the lead member for performance.
Thank
I
you.
think she will be assisted by Nicola Neal from the Business Improvement and Modernisation team.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, diolch yn fawr. Caredig iawn, Gary yn deud byddai'n cael yn hynorthwyo.
Gary saying I'll be assisted by Nicola because it's a very short presentation from myself. This report I'm just going to wait for everybody to get their headsets on. Right, yes. Short presentation from myself. This report is a very comprehensive one. There's lots of information contained in it, very valuable information for the council in it. And I would like just to hand over to Nicola Neal to explain, the details of the report to you. We'll come to the recommendations at the end, shall we? Okay, thank you very much.
Diolch, Councillor Ellis and bore da pawb. My name's Nicola Neal and I'm currently Acting Head of Business Improvement and Modernisation. That covers a number of functions, but most notably for you, it covers performance management and also internal audit. So I will be with you for much of this morning and probably future meetings as well. Thank you. So the first item that I'd like to present to you today is the annual self-assessment on the council's performance. Now, accompanying the report, you've got 3 appendices. The first one is that self-assessment document, which is quite a short version, a short document that summarises conclusions that we've drawn from about our performance, both in terms of performance against corporate objectives and also across governance functions. This is quite a new report for us. It's a requirement under the Local Government and Elections Act, which was implemented last year. Last year we did pilot a version of this report, but this is the first year that, that this report has been a statutory requirement. Its purpose really is to draw on the wealth of information that's been brought to committees over the course of the year, in order to reach a succinct and summative evaluation really about how the council is performing and where there might be areas for improvement. It's drawn on quarterly performance reports that have been tabled at committees, news stories, various committee papers, statutory reports such as the Director of Social Services report, annual governance statement, and also statement of accounts. So it draws on a wealth of evidence really in order to give that succinct evaluation of how the council is performing. That's what we particularly like you to focus on today, because as the Governance and Audit Committee, you have a statutory role to approve this particular report. And you'll see that the recommendations in the cover report refer to the fact that if you are welcome to make comments and also make recommendations for any changes to this report before it is tabled at council, which will be later in July. If you do make any recommendations, we have a duty to consider those recommendations and report them to council, either report on the action that we've taken in response to your recommendations, or if Cabinet decides that gives consideration and doesn't act on those reports, it needs to give a rationale to council as to why that is. So I'd particularly like you to focus on Appendix 1 today. Also, for your information, Appendix 2 is the fourth of this year's quarterly performance reports, reflecting on how the council has been delivering against its wellbeing objectives within the corporate plan, and also equality objectives, which are also housed within our corporate plan. And then the third appendix that you've got is a document that is something of a one-off document that we wouldn't normally include, because we've just reached the end of a council term. It's a document that is intended to be a succinct before and after comparison, really, of how the council has performed against the corporate objectives that it set itself in the previous term. So it states the baseline from where we were performing initially 5 years ago, and the level of ambition that we set ourselves, the targets that we set ourselves, and also notes what we've been able to achieve in that time. These reports have this week been to Cabinet. They went there yesterday. Coming to you today will be tabled at performance scrutiny tomorrow, for your information as well, before going to council, hopefully for ratification later in July. So today, for the Governance and Audit Committee, I'd really like to take any questions and give you assurance on the process that we've gone through in terms of developing this self-assessment. The legislation requires us to draw on a wealth of evidence, reports, etc., that have taken place, that have been developed and taken place throughout the year. And we've done that in order to reach these conclusions, and would also welcome your any questions or comments on the content of that report in Appendix 1. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much for that. Just to say, I'm aware, am I right in thinking that most of the councillors here are new to this committee?
To this committee, I think the only councillor who is currently on the committee, who was on the committee previously, is Councillor Ellie Chad, but other members, some of whom are experienced members.
Okay. I was just thank you. I was just going to say that as someone who's fairly new to the committee, when I look through a report like this and I see about 150 odd pages, I'm thinking I'm supposed to read all this. I have glanced through it and I have read parts of it. I'm just saying that it can be rather daunting, I think, but don't be afraid of asking any questions at all. So if there's any questions of the officers, thank you. If you could indicate if you have any questions or any points, observations. Councillor Nigel Rudd, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Useful report and a good capture, I think. And as the Chair has said, a lot of us are going through a bit of a learning curve. So a couple of questions, Nicola, if I may, through the Chair. Appendix 1, page 33. talks about procurement and the support and the improvement of guidance to services in that area. Can you expand as to where full information in regard to that type of issue would be discovered amongst other papers of the council, so that if somebody like myself wanted to read behind some of the summary comments contained in your report, where would I go on that? And the second question for you is, I'm looking for the council to be assisting in terms of the community generally, and specifically also in relation to business. And I just sense there's a lack of referencing perhaps to the business community as part of the overall community coming through in this report. So I'd just be interested in a view from you in relation to that particular matter. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Would Nicola like to respond to that, I think? Or?
Thank you. In relation to the procurement question, Chair, could I please get back to the committee on that? I will do some research to find out where those reports are. It's a colleague of mine who can't be here today who's led on the development of this and will know the information that's been drawn on in detail. And so I will source those reports for you and information and share with the committee after today's meeting, if that's okay. In terms of that support for the community, including the business community, yes, really important question about how we support our communities to thrive, really, whether that's at a personal level or for economic reasons. The report that you've got today focuses on our the corporate priorities that we'd set ourselves in the previous term. So they were housing, connected communities, which is around digital infrastructure, the environment, young people, and sorry, I'm just trying to think of that fifth priority was, just bear with me and I'll glance through my papers. Our community resilience as well, which focused really on the resilience of people within our communities. So none of those headings directly cover support for businesses and the business community, for example, which is why it might be absent from this evaluation. However, there is work ongoing. We have an economic and business development team, etc., and we could provide some information to you about some of the highlights of the work that have been done over the last 12 months. But that's why it won't explicitly be referenced in this report, because this report does explicitly reference the key priority areas in our corporate plan and also those key governance areas.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from Nigel? Does that answer your question satisfactorily for now, I should say?
Yes, thank you, Chair, for the moment.
Okay. Any other questions or points from members? May I just ask a couple of things on my own part there? And Nicola, I think it's probably for you this. On page 26, the report mentions service performance challenges as an opportunity for senior managers, cabinet and scrutiny members to be assured regarding performance. I understand the point of that. I think it's good. I'm glad there's a process like that there. I'm just going to ask, what's the extent of engagement in these challenges in terms of attendance and challenge, particularly from members?
Thank you. So the service performance challenges are internal meetings as opposed to public meetings that take place on an annual basis, where the performance of each service against its business plan is scrutinised. In terms of political representation, the way that we usually organise this is that there will be the lead member or members for that service present at the challenge, along with a representative from each of the scrutiny committees. So at this time of year, now that we have a new council, we would start to talk to scrutiny committees and ask for representation from each committee to cover a particular service. And then those people will be invited to the appropriate service challenge. So does that answer your question, Chair?
Yeah, I was going to say, you said that invited. I mean, I take it people turn up.
Yes, they do. Yes, yeah. Okay. There are some services where attendance is greater than others, I would say. For example, sometimes support services might have a lower attendance than some of the more key statutory services, such as education, but attendance isn't usually an issue for us. I must say that in terms of the service challenges, there was a little bit of a hiatus during the pandemic. So this is a programme that that we repeated in the last financial year, and which will gain momentum again now over the next term.
Thank you. I'm just seeing assurance that there is actual interest in it. I think we have a question from. Sorry, I can't read the writing of that. Councillor Evans, Councillor Hugh Evans.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of the reporting to service challenge, it wasn't always clear where scrutiny reps reported back to their scrutiny. I wasn't clear how that happened, and it's something that we could probably be improved upon. So that's all scrutiny members are familiar with what the service challenge, what comes up in that. So there is something that could be improved upon there. Thank you.
I don't know if the officers want to respond to that or just take a note of it for the future.
I can confirm, Chair, that scrutiny members are expected to report back to their scrutiny committees, and I will raise with the scrutiny facilitator reminding all scrutiny representatives as they are appointed by their respective committees during this run of service challenge, especially as some of those members may be new members, just to make sure that they're properly briefed.
Thank you. Any other questions from members? May I ask just 3 other things of myself, of my own bat? There's various mention of risk management in the report and so on. Just because risk management and mention of the corporate risk register feeds into other items on this agenda, would it be possible for someone to send me a copy of the latest copy of the corporate risk register for future?
Yes, no problem at all, Chair. We're actually taking that to performance scrutiny tomorrow as well, so that is available on our modern.gov pages as well.
I think it's coming to the next audit, to the next governance and audit committee, isn't it? I think, but
yes,
I'd be grateful for a copy.
Yes,
please, if that's all right. I should one of the questions, 2 other questions from me on this report. There's a fantastic amount of work gone on to this. I know it's easy to look at it, be daunted about, but it's really important. This stuff is. I should have mentioned this when Nigel mentioned procurement, but there's mentioned there about the procurement of a manager's post. And there's been difficulty in filling this, and hopefully there's funding. I think it says funding was hoped to be obtained this financial year. Is there any? Can you? Sorry.
So yeah, procurement falls under my service, Chair. We have had a number of recruitment exercises in respect of the manager post for the procurement service, none of which have borne fruit. We're currently looking at internal structural answers to provide appropriate management oversight. In the meantime, there's been temporary management oversight provided by the legal services manager and colleagues in procurement. The funding that you're referring to relates to an additional business partner post within the procurement team, specifically concentrating on decarbonisation.
Thank you. Any other points on this agenda item? No. Happy to move on. I think we have a recommendation to agree, do we not? I think. Yeah. I think we're asked to approve the report. So can I have a proposal for that, please? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I think what we would usually do, Chair, is we would ask the lead member to read out the recommendations, and then you can ask if anybody wishes to move or second. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, the recommendations are, first of all, that the committee reviews or approves the draft report, considering any changes required to conclusions or actions that the council intends to take. And secondly, should the committee offer recommendations for change, the report must be amended before submission to council. If the change is not adopted, the final report must explain the reason why. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So happy to accept. Do you have a proposer to accept the report? Thank you, Paul. And seconder? 2 seconds. Nigel Road and Councillor Chard. Thank you. All in favour? Sorry. Thank you. Okay. Rightio. Next item on the agenda, item 8, the internal audit annual report from pages 153 to 184 in your agenda packs. Excuse me, I'm just turning to it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to introduce this agenda item. Internal audit forms part of my service. So I will introduce the paper and then hand over to our Chief Internal Auditor, Bob Chowdhury, to take you through some of the detail. Thank you. Okay. So this annual report from Internal Audit is an example of good practice under the public sector internal audit standards, and it's a standard that we adopt. We work to those standards, and those standards require an annual report on internal audit in order to feed into our annual governance statement, which is a statutory document. The report that Bob will introduce to you provides a synopsis of the work undertaken by the internal audit team, and also the conclusions that they've reached in their work, in order to provide the committee with an opinion on the overall effectiveness of Denbighshire's management and governance in relation to risk and general management as well. It's the Chief Internal Auditor's opinion that you're receiving today, but it is based on the wealth of information and evidence that they've picked up during the year. So if I can hand over to Bob now, he will take you through some of the details of the report. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Bob Chowdhury, as Nicola said, and I'm the new Chief Internal Auditor. Obviously, this is my first internal audit annual report that I've had to do, and obviously slightly more difficult this year in the sense I came back to audit from a 2-year secondment to TTP on the 4th of April, so it's been a quick learning curve getting back into audit and parking TTP. So as Nicholas says, there's 7 areas that we've looked at to form an opinion. So the scope and outcome of internal audit work during the year is considered. All areas that we are discussed with heads of service as to what areas we'd look at auditing during the last financial year, and these areas then have been put into an audit plan, and obviously throughout the year the audit reviews have taken place. Any follow-up actions in respect of audits from previous years, we've looked at to ensure that progress has been made in internal audit reports during the last 12-18 months. Internal audit report opinion and insurance ratings are given for every report we undertake. So obviously we have high assurance, medium, low and no assurance. Happy to say over the last 12 months, we've had 2 low assurance, no non-assurance, and the rest have been made up of medium high assurance ratings. The issues and risks the internal audit has raised during the year, we look at all issues throughout the year that we have raised and then go through seeing whether or not these issues need to be followed up with an action plan, and obviously a follow-up review during the year. The effectiveness and management responses to the issues and risks that internal audit raises is an important area. Obviously, we raise issues at a drafting meeting with individuals, and they have their time to actually discuss actions raised and ultimately produce an action plan. we propose what issues have been raised. It's for the services to actually produce their actions and recommendations, because that way we feel that obviously a service is able then to take their actions on board and own them better. Assurance received from external regulators and other sources are a key part of this opinion. So obviously Wales Audit Office, we look at the reports they've carried out through the year, and we have regular meetings with them throughout the year on a monthly basis, so that we can touch base with them and discuss reviews we're carrying out, and obviously reviews they've undertaken during the year. And then the outcome of the council's review of its corporate governance framework and governance arrangements are taken into consideration throughout the year. So that is the basis of how we form our opinion on the internal audit process during the last 12 months. Obviously, going down through the report, you'll see that during the last 5 years, you've got the breakdown of high, medium, low, no assurance and advisory reports. So as you can see, last year we covered 26 reviews in total. We had 8 high assurance, 14 medium and 2 low. And we did 2 pieces of advisory work during the year. Part of the internal annual report is around counter fraud and the National Fraud Initiative. So over the last 12-18 months, we've looked at the 2021 National Fraud Initiative, and we've gone through the report and looked at areas of concern, and obviously carried out reviews on service and areas. You will notice that the council tax reduction scheme has increased over the last 12 months to 74,000 recovery. And as you'll see in the report, over the years, the number of housing benefits matches have reduced significantly due to the rollout of universal credits, and the number of council tax reductions have increased, which has resulted in the council processing far more council tax reduction matches this year. As a consequence of that is the reason for the high increase in that area. Then we go into added value, corporate governance working groups and the collaborative works. We've looked at that, the collaborative work we carry out with the North Wales and Mid Wales internal audit partnership groups, where as Chief Internal Auditor, I attend regular meetings with them and we share best practice and knowledge. And that's a good way of gauging how well we're doing with our counterparts in North Wales and Mid Wales. It also benefits us when we carry out reviews, because we have a working practice in place that we can share best practice and obviously share working papers and obviously reviews that we've done over the last 12 months. Agile working is a way of auditing we've carried out in the last sort of 3 years. The pandemic unfortunately put an end to agile working, but we are now, over the last sort of 3-4 months, reintroducing agile working as a way of working. It's seen as a positive from senior management. They like the idea of us coming in and trying to carry out the review in a timely and appropriate manner. And then obviously we use certain techniques like data analysis to carry out our auditing to improve our quality of audit. So we use active data from Excel. It's a tool that we find very beneficial because active data allows us to integrate a large amount of work very quickly. And then obviously, lastly, the insurance mapping is an important part to internal audit, where we look at the work we carry out through the year on the audit mapping point. And then if I can just take you through internal audit performance, we had, I think it was 8 questionnaires returned this year, and happy to say that all questionnaires either had good or very good responses. We had no negative responses, and going forward, we added one last one in: how well has internal audit adapted to remote working? Because we felt this was quite an important part from internal audit's point of view this year. And I'm glad to say all services we had responses back from felt the way we were now working was beneficial to both ourselves and them. So that's the internal audit annual report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Right, thank you. I'm sure there will be some questions. I think it's fair enough to again recognise the work that's been done in difficult circumstances over the last year and the change in personnel as well. So again, there's a lot of work behind this, and that needs acknowledging. So members, any questions for the officers? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd just like to thank and appreciate the work of internal audit. It's really important that, you know, it does hold everybody to account in a certain way. But in my previous role, I never understood what triggered off a review. Was it internal auditors reading reports and they had concerns, or was it senior management using them as a tool to improve their service? I never quite got to the bottom of that, and it's just something I'd like, if possible, to get some clarity on what triggers a review.
What triggered the review? Who's best to respond to this, Nicola or Bob?
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Evans. Right then, several issues or concerns can trigger a review. Obviously, on an annual basis, we have the mapping process, assurance mapping, where we rank all our services within Denbighshire. So every service is on our Excel spreadsheet. We look at the corporate risks, the directive risks to the individual services. So we rank them on the risk levels. We look at financial elements that are implied. So obviously services that spend a big amount of money, they're a higher risk to the council. And then as Chief Internal Auditor, I go around heads of service throughout the year, and we discuss at the heads of service meetings with their team what reviews they might have concerns about. So it's 3 or 4 different ways of doing it. Also, Chief Internal Auditor group I attend for the whole of Wales, concerns are raised in those groups, and obviously I will go back to my team of internal auditors and obviously head of BIM and raise concerns there that, you know, issues have been identified in South Wales or Mid Wales that have approached the service managers to gauge their thoughts, feelings on it. So it's made up of several different areas.
Chair, can I come back?
Please.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Could I come back on that?
Yes, sure. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, Bob. That's really helpful. That does provide some clarity, and it might be helpful if that was recorded somewhere in a report, so that we understand the process of how reviews actually do take place. Because I did sense a little bit, I might be wrong in my sensing, that sometimes senior managers depended too much on internal audits to improve the service. And that to me is something that I would be concerned about. So I appreciate that response, Bob, but I would like it clarified in order that we can all understand how reviews take place and what triggers them off. Thank you.
Bob, sorry, yeah.
We are doing a member training for the Governance and Audit Committee. So I think in that particular training session, I'll bring a bit more information to the table, if that's okay. And I can go through in a bit more detail how everything is carried out, if that would be helpful.
That training will apply to the lay members as well, will it? Please.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Evans, is that all right? Okay.
Yeah, the training would be good. We all need training, but then I would still push a little bit that we formalise an understanding of the process of the reviews at some point. It might not be now, Chair, but it's something that I never got to the bottom of in my previous role, and as a member of this committee, I would like to get some clarity on that.
Okay. Nigel, you've got your hand up, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Probably through you, Chair, this is targeted at Bob. There is a little suspicious part of my mind, Bob, that when I get to page 170 on the form, and I see a survey table there, which is complete with 100%, 100%, 100%. And I'm thinking, yes, it's nice to see, but it begs a question about, are those actually the right sort of questions to be asked? Is everything 100% and does it need to be 100%? And you can do no better. So there's a bit of me that says, and I know you referred to it earlier, how valuable is that table, or does it actually need a rethink? And I don't want you to come back and it's just me saying, when I see something like that, there's almost an alert that goes off that says something might not be perfect. The real question I have is in relation to page 175, which is about where you defer and cannot pursue an audit. In those circumstances, there's a list of cases there. What are the reasons behind? Is it resources, or is it capacity? Is it the lack of gravitas in relation to the type of area being discovered? Perhaps you can give some more feedback on that. Thank you, Jim.
Nigel. Bob, do you want to respond to that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Nigel. Firstly, going to page 170 and to the actual questionnaire, it's something I have raised with the team last month. Obviously, the old Chief Internal Auditor used to do the questionnaires, send them out on an annual basis to all individuals. It's done on an anonymous basis. Where I've worked previously, we used to send the questionnaires out after the review, and we got a greater response. It wasn't anonymous in that sense, but more people tended to respond. So you're quite right. We only had 8 questionnaires out of 26, so it's only a third roughly came back. I'd like to improve the number of questionnaires coming back. I think the questions, to be fair, are reasonable because obviously we've looked at the questions with our neighbours across North Wales and North England, and they all tend to ask very similar questions. So I take your points on board. We're looking at trialling every 3 months, sending the questionnaires out anonymously to see if we can increase the number coming back, and then hopefully that might give us some different answers. Because you're quite right, people who are angry with an audit tend to want to vent their anger straight away. If you allow them to have a couple of months to simmer, they either forget to do the questionnaire or they give you a fairer questionnaire. So I think we need them quicker to see what people think at the time. And then the second point, where we cancel or defer actual audits, it's a number of reasons. Some of them are to do with resources. Over the last 12 months, internal audit were a person down because obviously I was seconded to TTP and we couldn't fill the post. So that's part of the reason. Some of the school audits have been put back because obviously COVID kept on rearing up its ugly head. So we'd be agreeing to go out to schools to do the majority of the review remotely. But obviously we had to go to some schools to pick up documents, and that caused us problems with 2 of the 3 schools on the list there. And then highways and maintenance, again, they had issues throughout the year with resources, with COVID hitting their teams quite heavily. So that was a reason for that one being put back. Community safety was started just at the end of the financial year. But again, we've had a couple reviews come in over the last sort of 2 months that have taken priority. So that's why community safety got parked in the end. But you are right, it's partly resources on audit side, but also sometimes it's service resources or demands saying to us that, you know, at the time it's not quite appropriate. So we do have to take those into consideration.
Yeah, can I just ask a quick supplementary?
Sure.
Bob, is that, given that we're new in to this committee, is that level of deferrals higher or lower than what's occurred historically? And if you project forward, are you expecting it to be higher or lower than, say, 12 months time report would supply?
It's probably higher in the last 2-3 years. It has been higher than it has in the past. Hopefully going forward this year, we'll get a full complement of internal audit team in by the end of the summer. And we should then hopefully be able to get close to hitting the actual plan. Obviously, there are a couple of things outside my control. Obviously, staffing and sickness are 2. Obviously, if members leave the team, that can put audits back because obviously we haven't got the manpower in place, and obviously sickness again can be an issue. And then obviously, depending where this pandemic or endemic ends up in the next 12 months, could cause us problems again. But we're aiming this year to try and hit more of the audits.
Thank you, Chair.
Nigel, any point? Is it okay? I just follow up. I mentioned a follow-up question on that same point. I think you completed 26 audits in the last financial year, and bearing in mind some have been rolled over. And I see, and I'm jumping the gun here. In one of the when you got the audit strategy, which is item 10 on this agenda, I think you've got 34 audits planned, which is actually an increase in 8. Are you still hopeful that you'll complete that additional number of audits?
We are hopeful, because obviously we are aiming this year. The last 2 years they've been a person down, so that has caused a lot of problems being a senior auditor down. Obviously, I've got to recruit into the principal auditor's post first, which was my post that I secured in February, and then obviously I'm looking then to secure an additional auditor that we're short of, and then obviously discussions with my member as well, because obviously in my interview I did say audit is currently very poorly staffed, and in my opinion we could do with additional staff on board. So obviously that's something I'll be looking at trying to put in place over the next 12 months.
Just going back to Nigel's first question on the customer survey questions, I also was a bit, my skepticism rose up a bit on that as well. I was a bit surprised at the amount of 100%, but when you say that at the end of the year, that partly explains it. I think it's just an observation that sometimes I'd have thought sometimes as an auditor, you can do a really good job and someone won't like what you're saying. And so they might score you low for that. So sometimes just to get a low score isn't always a bad indication of how well you've done. Just one thing that strikes me with the questions, I just wondered if any thought had been given to when you do an audit, do you make recommendations, specific recommendations for improving controls and so on, or for putting things right?
We raise issues and then we work with the department to actually put the recommendation action in place, so they agree what they're going to do with the issue.
Whether there was some indicator as to whether they've actually implemented those things might be a good test of
we do follow up all reports, so we will go out to the department 6 months later and do a quick half-day assessment on what they've said they should have done in that time.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just picking up, first of all, just picking up Bob's point about resources. I think I'm right, Gary, that within the Constitution, the terms of reference of this committee do provide for ensuring that internal audit has adequate and sufficient resources. It follows, therefore, that it is something that Bob should be proactively coming back to us about if there are issues in relation to delivering the plan in the strategy. And my second point is a specific one on page 167, but I don't know whether you want to comment first on what I've just said about the terms of reference of this committee.
Yes, you're right. One of the functions of this committee is to have oversight of the audit function.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you'll need to be satisfied of is that there are sufficient resources available to enable the audit function to be discharged appropriately and effectively. Clearly, we have internal budget processes in respect of resource, and Steve Gadd, Section 151 officer, is attending the meeting, so I'll be careful what I say to make sure that I don't step on any toes. But there is an internal process whereby services can identify pressures in terms of capacity or additional resource, and then they go through a process through the budget board and then through the consultation process around the budget. So there is a way of identifying those pressures and raising them. Clearly, if at the end of that process you get to a point where you feel that perhaps the chief internal auditor is advising you that they still don't have enough resource, that becomes an issue for you. But there is an internal process for identifying pressures and for dealing with it as part of the budget process. I hope I've not overstated the case in financial terms, since I'm not the finance officer.
Gary, that's fine. If I may, Chair, just pick it up. That's fine, Chair. It was just reminding everybody, or informing everybody, if you will, of the scope of the responsibilities of the committee. Obviously, it's something that can be picked up with training and so on, but I thought it worthwhile mentioning. Chair, I do have another question, if I may.
I think, can we just park that a minute? I see in response to what you said, two of the officers have put their hands up. Is it okay just to park that and we'll come back to it? And I think Steve and Nicola both want to respond, but Steve first.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, well, just in response to Gary's comments, really, he's perfectly right. I was going to raise as part of the AOB that actually we would normally bring a report on the budget process to this committee as well. It's around the process rather than the actual proposals within the budget, but that usually comes twice a year to this committee, so I will raise that as part of the AOB. But in principle, Gary's right. We put a process in where services can put forward pressures. They're considered in the round, because obviously not only will this committee have views, and that's quite right that they express views on the ability of internal audit to carry out their functions, but we obviously have a whole load of other pressures that need to be considered in the round, and then we produce obviously a budget proposals that then go through to Cabinet and ultimately Council for approval. And that's right that, you know, all those pressures are considered in the round and prioritised, etc. So yeah, I mean, just backing up what Gary said, really, just to make sure that we were on the same page.
Thank you. Nicola, I think.
Thank you. Yes, also on the topic of staffing, just to give the committee assurance that Bob and I are in discussions about staffing levels at the moment within the internal audit team. I would remind the committee that the team has been carrying a vacancy for a couple of years when Bob was on secondment, and since he's taken on the role of Chief Internal Auditor recently as well, there is a vacancy in the team. So it is a priority for us, first of all, to ensure that that all vacant roles within the internal audit team are filled, and we will then also look at prior to the secondment situation, the vacancies the team was carrying, we'll do some work to look at how the team performed against its plan in the years prior to carrying those vacancies. I'm quite new to managing the audit team as well, but we will take a look at how we were performing against our audit plans in the previous 5 years in order to make an assessment as to whether we think that there's a case for increasing the capacity of the internal audit team. So just wanted to give to remind the committee of the fact that we have carried a vacancy, and that will have contributed to the gaps in the plan in being filled, and also to give you assurance that it is something that Bob and I are working on. Thank you.
Thank you. May I just on that point, excuse me, in the report that I've read, this one and the audit strategy for 2022-23, perhaps I've missed it, but I can't see any reference to any staffing resources, what size staffing resources you have in internal audit. And I'm just thinking, bearing in mind what we've just said, that it's perhaps a concern is too strong a word for the moment. We do it's like a bit of a watching brief of this committee, as Paul has reminded us. Maybe if in future reports there was something on staffing figures in there, it would help us to be aware of that, if that's okay, just for future reference.
Yeah,
it's a suggestion more than a recommendation, but would they have the member support on that? Anyone object to it? Okay. Nicola, do you still have your hand up? Sorry.
It is a new hand, as we'd say, yeah. So yes, on that point, I've heard a couple of suggestions today that I think it would be useful for us to include in that internal audit strategy in future. One is a summary of the prioritisation process that we go through for arriving at the audit plan, and the second being adding some context around the staffing capacity of the team. So thank you for those two suggestions. I can see that they would add value and give you more information that you need to provide you with assurance. So we will include those in future. Thank you.
Members, any other points you wish to raise? Paul?
Yeah, just going back to my second question.
Sorry, yes, I beg your pardon.
On page 167, at the top, it's right at the end of the section dealing on other counter fraud activity. I quote, a senior auditor has been awarded the accredited counter fraud investigator qualification, but unfortunately the case management system to track fraud has not been set up. Is there a project plan in place, and what's the time frame for that, please?
I believe over the last 12 months, they were looking at working on this case management system. I'd have to get back to you, Paul, on a bit more detail, because obviously I've not looked into it myself yet. It's on the list of jobs to do.
I appreciate you must have an extensive to-do list, and I regret adding to it. It's just that if someone's got this accredited counter fraud investigator qualification, ideally they need the tools to do the job. Well, you could say essentially they need the tools to do the job, and this is one of them.
Yes, you're quite right, Paul. The individual qualified the back end of last year, so obviously she has raised that this case management system needs to be in place, and it's something going forward we will be looking at trying to adopt and get in place, hopefully by the end of the summer.
Thank you. On page 165, where you talk about the National Fraud Initiative, this is part of the counter fraud summary, you talk about the National Fraud Initiative and that table there. What are those figures there? Is that the amount of fraud that's suspected as a result of the exercise, the National Fraud Initiative exercise, or is that the amount of fraud actually detected?
Detected.
So that all that's been investigated, has it?
Yes, obviously we look at the information we get from National Fraud Initiative. Obviously it's pages and pages of information. We can't look at everything on the list, so we prioritize the high rating ones that have come to us, and then we work through. We spend so many days going through as many as we can, and obviously these are the figures that we've got. Obviously council tax have done quite a bit of the work around the council tax reduction scheme.
Have any more questions on this report? Okay, I think the recommendation is that we accept the report. I think I'm right, Gary? So I'm just going back. So can I have a proposer that we accept the report? Paul, and someone to second it? Councillor Chard, I think. And all in favour? Okay, thank you. Moving on, item 9, the annual governance statement from page 185. Who's going to present this? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I will introduce this paper and then hand over to Bob to take you through some of the detail, please. So the annual governance statement is a statutory document that we produce each year. It is statutory because it also contributes to the statement of accounts, and it's a really thorough investigation of the governance functions within the council. That's based on self-assessment and also reports that have gone to committees throughout the year. The framework on which it's based is that of the Accounts and Audit Wales regulations. So the framework, the governance areas against which it assesses us are set down in law and legislation. Not only do we assess ourselves against the governance functions noted in that legislation, but we also produce an action plan which forms part of this annual governance statement as well. So if I can hand over to Bob, he'll take you through some of the detail. Diolch.
Thank you, Nicola. Yes, obviously the annual governance statement is an annual statement that I'm asked to report upon and produce. So the statement is a pretty standard document. Information is gathered from several different sources. So I gather information from Nicola's team, performance team around the performance of the council. I gather information from Gary Williams's team around monitoring issues that have gone on in the council over the last 12 months. Then obviously Steve Gadd, the Section 151 officer, I gather information from his team, and then obviously compile it all with information from internal audit. So as you can see, going through the document, there's core principles which are underpinned by the SIP for Solace framework. So there's the behave with integrity, engage with stakeholders, define outcomes, ensure planned outcomes are achieved, develop capacity, capability and leadership, manage risk and performance effectively, and demonstrate transparency and accountability. So obviously that information is gathered, and obviously in those principles I've reported down the opinion of internal audit there. Then we go on to look at the impact of COVID over the last 12 months, because obviously COVID over the last 2 years has impacted on the annual government statement. So obviously this year the pandemic has continued to be to have an impact on the council. The council now has a new way of working. As you're aware, today we're in a hybrid meeting. They are now the norm for members and officers. Probably 18 months ago, it was very much a different situation. We were just getting together to do team meetings and Zoom meetings, and now we've got a full-blown hybrid meeting, which is fantastic. So I'm happy to say now that members are able to report better in meetings. Meetings are more effective, and obviously information from the meetings can be shared. All our meetings now are webcast as well. So obviously from a point of view of being transparent, people, members of the public can dial in and listen to the meetings, which is fantastic. Then we go into key contributors to developing and maintaining the governance framework. So you've got the council, the cabinet, the governance and audit committees, the standard committees. So I'm outlining there about the different committees that the council has. And then looking at internal source of assurance that we've been able to gather information from, and then we go to the external. So obviously, as I've said before, meet with Wales Audit Office on a monthly basis, and obviously Gwilym was able to provide me with documents that I've been able to glean information off and provide you with assurance that obviously work done outside of the council has given assurance that the council is performing appropriately and adequately. And then, apologies, just scrolling down, you've got the actual audit reports, what we've undertaken. So we've got the 2 action plans. So we've got the 2021 updates to let members know the items that were identified as being required to be reviewed. We've looked at the progress in place. So some of them are still outstanding, but obviously we've rolled them into the next financial year, and we'll be looking at the progress during the next 12 months. And the agreed actions are there as to how they will be moved forward. So happy to take questions.
Bob, any questions for the officers, members? Thank you. Finally, I've got a question myself, perhaps that other members. Oh, sorry, Nigel, I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair. Again, an interesting report. Page 197 refers to the Strategic Emergency Management Team. Is that still in existence, or have the terms of that changed, or going forward, is its focus going to change? Thank you.
Apologies, finding the page.
Page 197.
Sorry, Nigel, can you just repeat the question? I found the page.
Is just to clarify the status of the Strategic Emergency Management Team.
At the moment, I'm assuming it is still going on.
I can assist there. The Strategic Emergency Management Team was stood up during the pandemic, was meeting regularly. It comprised the senior leadership team of the council, and in addition, it had HR colleagues and ICT colleagues on it to help in the pandemic response. The Strategic Emergency Team exists, but has been stood down in terms of the COVID situation, and it can be stood up again whenever is necessary. At the height of the pandemic, it was meeting virtually daily. The frequency of the meetings then reduced as the pandemic sort of response continued. In addition, we also had senior elected member attendance at some of those meetings as well. The leader, then leader and deputy leader also attended some of those meetings in order that they were kept up to speed with the response. And we also introduced a greater frequency of political group leader meetings in order that they could also be kept up to date with the response. And various members of the Strategic Emergency Management Team were also tasked with representing the council on different regional emergency response bodies that had been set up in order that they could feed back into the organisation to make sure that what we were doing was consistent with the regional approach to the pandemic, as clearly some of the issues were outside a local authority area and were dealt with on a regional basis.
Nigel?
Yeah, through you, Chair. A slight side issue, perhaps, then it may need to go back to Gary to say, is that information captured coherently somewhere? I mean, I'm mindful of the changing circumstance and context that we're all going through, and that some pressures now are less than they were historically. Is the position of the council clearly set out somewhere, so that if I wanted to go and, as part of the reading outside of the meeting, go and search out a document, is captured somewhere?
The structure of the Strategic Emergency Management Team, etc., is set out. I'd have to find the appropriate link to the appropriate document to be able to get that to you. In terms of the dates of meetings, the frequency of meetings, etc., I'd have to go. I don't hold those. I'd have to go and get those from somebody else. But in terms of the actual structure of the Strategic Emergency Management Team membership, etc., and its terms of reference, then I can get that for you and can circulate it to members.
Okay. Any other questions? Paul?
Thank you, Chair. In page 205 in the annual governance statement, looking at the 2021-22 issues, there is reference to Proactis and whether for current contract management it is still fit for purpose. This seems to have been around for some time. What's the present state of play in drawing a line and saying, yes, it is fit for purpose, or we can make it fit for purpose, or we're going to have to replace it?
The Proactis, sorry, Chair, through you. The Proactis system is still our system. The issue around contract management is that there are contract management modules available within the system, and there has been set up a contract manager forum across the council, working with procurement to look at how the system can be adapted to make the best use of the modules that are available. Clearly, it's the system the council has. We need to make it work. And to make sure that people are putting the right information on the system. So there's assistance and support being given to services to ensure that they are able to upload the relevant information onto the system.
If I may, Chair, just respond to that. So it's changing council processes to match up the modules that are available, is it?
It's effectively looking at where there were pockets of good practice across the council in terms of contract management, trying to make those more consistent and trying to make sure that the modules that are available on Proactis are used to the best extent. But primarily in terms of contract management, the focus has been on making sure that best practice is disseminated, and that the contract management forum is looking at the key areas of training and adaptation that need to be done to suit the needs of services, rather than it being driven from the centre.
Is there a deadline for this, or is it seen as an ongoing process?
To a certain extent, it's an ongoing process. The contract management forum has been set up. That is the vehicle now for us to be able to exchange best practice within the council. They have, with the assistance of contract management officers in finance, developed a risk matrix to be able to identify and categorize the risk of contracts. And depending on the categorization, then there are different contract management processes that are applicable to those. And so that forum will continue, and procurement business partners as well are making sure that they're able to assist services where they've got difficulties with the use of the system.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Paul, if I could just follow on from that. Obviously, the little committee's been set up, the working group. They are going through, and it is partly educating staff, officers, to understand that what is a contract, what forms a contract. Then obviously once they've identified whether it's a contract or just a one-off transaction, if it's a contract, they need to put it on Proactis, and it's then explaining to them what elements of Proactis can be used. So it's something that I think, you know, we are doing a follow-up on contract management, and it's an area that we probably will follow 2 or 3 more times, just to make sure that officers are understanding the benefits of Proactis going forward.
Okay, thank you. We just speak other members of the committee. I think the annual governance statement is a pretty important document, and it's the opportunity for the council to say how it does governance, and also to raise any issues or any concerns. So are there anything, do you have any concerns from your work as councillors, or as your experience as lay members, anything that you would expect to see in the annual governance statement which you can't see there? Is there anything there at all that you would expect to see there which it isn't? I'll take that as a no. Okay, right, thank you. And may I just ask 1 or 2 things myself, as please, Bob? Page 213 talks about the review of the whistleblowing policy, and it said the agreed action was to update the policy capturing lessons learned from the recent concerns raised. Without going into too much detail, am I right in saying that has been looked at by either by the Standards Committee or by some other body?
So it's like a quick draw competition between myself and Bob here to see who can press the microphone button the quickest. The whistleblowing policy is due for just a general refresh. The policy sits in HR, and it will be going through a review. As with a number of other things, lots of HR staff were seconded into dealing with other things during the COVID process, in terms of sort of redeployment of staff and supporting various other processes that went on. And this was one of the bits of work that got pushed. It is due to be done, and there's also an annual whistleblowing report due to be brought to this committee. I think we would have hoped to bring it to this committee, but we weren't able to. So by the next committee, there'll be an annual review of the whistleblowing report. So
it talks about the concerns raised. The concerns are raised are to do with being largely connected to being out of date, not being up that, rather than any specific deficiencies that have been.
Yes, the policy is subject to a regular review, but we also do an annual report to this committee in respect of the concerns that have been raised over the previous period, to see whether there are any underlying themes or any issues of concern that arise out of them, or whether they're just individual matters.
It'll be caught anyhow as part of the routine.
Yes.
Okay. But just before we go off this agenda, just a general point on the annual governance statement. I like the flow that can be seen here with principle E, which is about developing capacity and capability, and then seeing the improvement areas. There's something about workforce capacity and resilience and reliance of key positions, which I like to see that flow there. But just the general thing about the annual governance statement, I know it has to be published as part of the statement of accounts. is it to be published as a separate document, bearing in mind that it's not just a financial document, it's got other aspects of governance in as well. Is it published separately from the statement of accounts?
I'm not 100% certain. Obviously, I need to take it to the senior leadership team, but Steve Gadd might come in on this one.
Yeah, I mean, the statutory, from on a statutory basis, it needs to be included in the statement of accounts, and that's where we include it. Obviously, it's included in papers. It comes to Governance and Audit Committee for approval before it gets included in the statement of accounts. So it's publicly available separately as part of this agenda, this meeting. But I'm not aware that it's actually a separate document anywhere. I don't suppose there's any objection. I guess that you formally approve the statement of accounts and this is included in it. So I suppose timing wise, it would probably be best if it was published separately. It was done after the statement of accounts is published, which is about the end of June this financial year, just because that's where we should publish it from a statutory point of view. So yeah, anytime after that, I don't see any problem with it being published separately. If that's what people want, it could be put on the website separately. That's fine. More the merrier, I think, to get engagement in it.
Specific recommendation to that, I don't know. I mean, my view is, as chair, but my view as a person is that the annual government statement is a pretty important document. It's not just a financial document, and it does comment on the governance of the council. And I think as members of this committee, we believe that corporate governance is an important thing as officers and as members together, and I think we need to try to generate interest in that. I'm not suggesting if it's published that we're going to get flocks of people queuing up to read it, but I think it is an important document and we should make it as available as possible. So I don't know whether we need to
I don't think you need to formally do anything,
Okay.
but certainly the minutes will reflect, and I will speak to Bob and Steve about the timing of it. I think I agree with Steve that there's a statutory obligation to publish it as part of the statement of accounts. We should do that first, but then I think we should put it in we should have it as a separate document on the appropriate part of the council's website that deals with corporate governance.
If that's done, if we could just ask consideration to be given to perhaps making it a little more reader friendly. That sounds like a really bad criticism. It's not, but if it's going to be aimed at the public, I noticed there's a few we talked about Proactis. A member of the public won't know what Proactis is. It talks about HOS. There's a lot of abbreviation. I know it's a head of service. It talks about SIG terms of reference. It talks about the matrix team. It talks about link. And perhaps just to make it a little more user friendly to for future, not on this occasion. I think for future years is what I'm suggesting.
I'm quite happy if you want. I can just go through it and just put in what all the abbreviations and the additional things are. So like Proactis.
I was thinking for future years, just to make it a bit more, consider making it a bit more user friendly. So
yep,
thank you.
Take that on board.
You. Agenda item 9. Okay, are we okay to go on for time, or do we need a break? Yes. Yes. Sorry, I should have remembered that. Sorry. The recommendation is, I think we have to. Can you? If you could read that,
Chair.
Thank you.
The recommendation is that the committee reviews and approves the draft annual governance statement for 2021-22, Appendix 1, and monitors the progress made on the action plan from 2020-21.
Subject, are we happy to accept that, subject to this sort of slight amendment of the abbreviations, etc.? I'll be happy to move that. A proposal. Paul, seconder. Councillor Chard, sorry, okay. All in favour? Thank you. Okay, are we okay for time? Yeah, would you like a comfort break for 5 minutes?
Good idea, Chair.
If you like a comfort break, could you raise your hand, please? Okay, we'll have a 5-minute comfort break if that's all right. Minutes though, please. I see a hand up. Sorry, I can't read. Councillor McClellan. Do you wish to share something, Councillor?
Sorry, no, I was just, I'm going to have to give my apologies, but I'm going to have to leave the meeting now. I just wanted to say, as a former chair myself of this committee. It was really, really interesting to see the newly formed committee and seeing everyone doing a great job and asking all the probing questions. As I say, as a former chair, it's just been really interesting. But and just to say thank you for that. But I'm going to have to leave now because of other diary commitments. So, this committee is a committee that's I'm for want of a better phrase, fond of, if you like. So I might be zooming in on more meetings. So, diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Thank you. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you. Right. Anybody else? Right, sorry, I'll move on. Anybody else now? All right, okay. I think we'll move on to agenda item 10, which is the internal audit strategy for 2022-23, page 217. So I take it, who's going to present this?
Chair, hello, that's myself and Bob again.
Okay, thank you.
Busy an agenda for us today. Thank you. Okay, so the next report that we have for you is a report that we again would bring to this committee on an annual basis, and it covers the internal audit charter and also gives you information about internal audit's work plan for the year. Again, I'll just give an introduction and then hand over to Bob, who will give you some of the detail. But essentially, the charter itself sets out the rules, principles, and internal governance over the internal audit function within Denbighshire County Council. And it describes the professional standards and the preservation of independence of the role, and the arrangements for that we have in place in Denbighshire. In terms of the internal audit strategy for the year, as mentioned before, that has been developed in conjunction with our heads of service, and it's risk-based, also in conjunction with colleagues from across Wales. And something that we've taken on board from today will be that we will elaborate upon the prioritisation process in future reports. So I'll hand over to Bob now, but just interesting to know this work plan that you'll receive today will form the basis of the internal audit summary that you've received earlier today and that you'll receive next year based on this work plan that we're presenting to you today. So thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Right then, the internal charter and the internal audit strategy are two documents that we will bring on an annual basis to this committee for approval. Obviously, the internal charter provides you with information around how internal audit will function throughout the year, and obviously I will take on board comments that have been made, and I'll put in the makeup of the audit team in the charter so that people know going forward what the size of the team is, and obviously the different grades, ranks of members of staff. So the charter, as I say, it breaks down into the internal purpose, mission and position within the council. It's a document that I have to produce on an annual basis and bring to yourselves. The purpose of it is to give a definition of internal audit, the core principles, our codes of ethic that we apply to, and obviously we comply with international standards for professional practice for internal audit. So this year the documents had to be changed slightly because obviously it goes into detail about my role and obviously myself. So obviously, background of myself, I'm a qualified CIPRA accountant and have been since 1995. So I've now put that in place so that you're aware of my role. It might be worth me putting in, when I put the team structure in, maybe some of their qualifications and background so you can see from an actual team what qualifications we all hold. So I'll bear that in mind next year. The internal audit positioning and reporting line, so it spells out who we report to. So the chief internal auditor has the functional reporting lines to the interim head of business improvement and modernisation at the moment, but also has direct access on internal audit issues to the council section 151 officer, chief exec, cabinet, governance and audit committee and scrutiny. So it spells out who we respond to. Then when you go into page 228, the internal audit charter, it gives you the scope of internal audit activities, what activities we carry out, resources of internal audit, which I need to put in next year around the team, and then reporting and monitoring process we take in place. So that's the chart, and it gives you quality assurance and improvement. And within the chart, I've outlined that obviously we are reviewed on an annual basis, on a 5-year basis. 2018 was reviewed by one of our peer authorities in Gwynedd. The Chief Internal Auditor came out and reviewed us. There were some recommendations put forward, which we now have completed them all, and we're due to be reviewed 2022-23. So back end of this year, we're due. Internal audit strategy. This outlines for the forthcoming year what internal audit work we will be undertaking. So if I just take you down page 236 gives you the high level audit plan. So the plan for 22-23 takes into account the council's corporate and service risk registers, the corporate assurance requirements, including the annual governance statement, the outcome of previous audits and those of the other assurance providers, discussion with the service management team, and planned work which was deferred in 21-22. Outlines counter fraud and the national fraud initiative that we will undertake. Partnership working that we'll undertake on 237, and then 238 proposed audit priorities for 22-23. So we go down then to outlining the audits for 22-23. So as you can see, there's an array of audits that we've agreed with heads of service and the directors. Some of these are carry forwards from last year that we brought forward into this plan, and others then have been agreed with individual heads of service. As Councillor Hugh Evans did mention, that there are reasons why officers might request us to carry out an audit, but that doesn't mean we will carry it out. We take requests on board, but we look at the reasons behind, and obviously would only carry out the review if we thought it was beneficial to the council. And then at the end, then you've got the internal audit performance monitoring. So scoping out what our service standards are for the year forthcoming. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Bob. Any questions on the internal audit strategy and the internal audit charter for 22-23? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've lost the report somewhere in my IT, but doesn't matter. That's nothing new. Some things stay the same. So that's the way it is in my neck of the woods. But the one thing I just want to follow up from my previous question, really. I'm sorry to be like a stuck record, but why do officers request? Is it a resource issue? Is it an accepted performance issue? Or is it realigning with regional agenda or not? And I'm just wondering, I'm not sure if this is the right agenda item to raise it, but I'm just using it as an opportunity, Chair. We need to understand why our senior managements are requesting internal audit to look at things. It might not be in this one, but it might be in another report. I'm just seeking further clarity, Chair.
Senior managers can request for numerous occasions, Councillor Evans. Firstly, I mean, they quite often come to us if they've got concerns about a service not performing to the abilities they thought it should. So we might then go in on a performance issue within that service, but we wouldn't carry out that work if we thought it was not beneficial to the council as a whole. We would first say to the senior leadership team in that department, you need to look at your service, you need to look at why you feel it's not performing, and then come back to us to give us some assurances as to why you still feel we need to be involved. It could be something that crops up during the year. There's issue within the department, internal audit naturally gets involved due to the issue that's been raised, and then we do a full-blown review of that service to give some assurance that whatever issues were identified at the beginning will not happen again.
Can I
Councillor,
come back, Chair? Yeah, I think it comes down to who's responsible for improving performance. You know, is it internal audit or is it our senior managers? And it's just something I've got to be in my bonnet about. I'm not saying I'm right, Chair. It's just something that I've not clearly understood and probably need the conversation somewhere along the line. It might end up in the training session that we as a group can have a bit more of an informal conversation about. But I've not quite understood it still.
that's certainly something that could be included in a training session, I think. May I just ask, sorry, Nigel, I see your hand up. I'll come back to you in a minute if I may. In response to your, in respect of your response to the question, Bob. If you get requested for extra work by management to do an additional audit, you say if it's beneficial to the council, does your judgment then take account of the if you have to put resources to that, then obviously something else is being squeezed at the other end. There's another audit that you can't do. So presumably you take account of that.
Yes.
And also, presumably that if you were in your professional judgment unhappy about it, you can escalate that up in your own management structure to the Section 151 officer if need be.
Yes, precisely. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, requests can come in. It's firstly my judgment with that head of service to sort of outline why they request that information, well, that additional report to be carried out, review. We then, as an internal audit team, will look at previous audits we've done in that area. So we'll look at background to see, has things changed since we were last on site? Yeah, things have changed. Have they changed for the benefit of the council or not? And then, if need be, you're correct, I'll go to Section 151 or I'll go to my main manager, Nicola, to raise concerns.
Or you could ultimately bring them to us.
Yes.
Yes. And also, I think it's incumbent upon us as a committee to make sure that if we see extra work that's been done on request, that we're satisfied that there were proper justifiable reasons for that. So
yeah, and I think I will go into more detail in the training. Obviously, I don't think today's the right place to go through reasons why we carry out work for heads of service, but in the training I can elaborate a little bit more.
Councillor Evans, are you okay with that response for now?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I've raised it. There isn't a conclusion today, is there? But the training will provide us with the opportunity to have a proper conversation. Thank you, Chair.
Nigel?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Three shortish questions, maybe for Nicola as well. The charter that's been promoted here, is that based on a template that all councils have to comply with and produce, and you have very little opportunity to make some minor variations? That's the first question.
In answer to that, Nigel, yes, the template is a standard template, but we are allowed to amend as required. So I'll take on board the 2 points that have been raised in the meeting today and add to the charter for next year.
Okay, thank you. The second is I'm mindful we're just in the post-election period, and the reality of much of the information that's coming through here in committee, we are reliant upon in our decisions being informed by our officers as to the history and the priorities at the moment. So looking at a report about the strategic priorities for audit at this point, there's an element of the sighted leading the blind in terms of what we should be focusing on. The reality in terms of this committee is that we're more likely to influence the priorities for 2023-24 and subsequent years, and potentially 2022-23, as the examiner would say, discuss.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Nigel. Going forward, you will all be able to input throughout the year, and you will obviously quite rightly see areas that you feel need additional reviews next year and can put them into the plan. But I'm happy this year. It's a flexible plan. We operate in Denbighshire. It's a 1 year rolling plan. If things come up in the year that you feel need to be addressed in the year, then the plan is amended in accordance with the Governance and Audit Committee's wishes.
the final short one on this was when looking at risk register priority stuff, do you actually use risk mapping in terms of showing the direction of travel on the risks as part of the overall either service risk assessment or somewhere on the risk register work? And if you do or don't, can we also pick that up as part of the training program for members?
Yeah, we do use risk mapping. We have an Excel spreadsheet, so we put the risks in to the spreadsheet against all the services within the department, and obviously then we, as I said before, we have different things, financial elements come in and different areas. I'll bring the document to the training, so maybe you could see in a bit more detail what document we use and what areas we put into it. I think that would be beneficial to you.
Is that the assurance mapping that's included as an appendix in the other report? And
yeah, but it's not in full detail.
No, but you give details of it. You give a summary of it, and there's details of the main corporate risks there and how they relate to the audit plan.
That's right. Yeah,
that's what we're talking about there. Yeah. Okay. Nigel?
Yep. No. I like pictures, Chair, and I was looking to encourage the inclusion of pictures stories.
Nicola?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just on the subject of risk, our risk management framework details our approach to risk and exactly what's recorded. So that will be shared with you when we bring that item to the committee's next meeting as well. And we will be asking you to comment on our risk management framework and also our compliance with the risk management framework. But in addition to discussing the direction of travel, we also work with risk appetite. We've introduced that concept over the past two to 3 years, and that's been really helpful for helping us to identify where the risks that we're carrying are inconsistent with our risk appetite, and that also helps to inform Bob's plan. So just a little bit more detail for you there on how we manage risk in the council. There'll be opportunities for us to discuss that in detail at future meetings. Thank you.
Any other questions, members? Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Only one. Only it's a comment rather than a question. In the strategy for 2022-23, right at the bottom, page 241, workforce planning linked to corporate and service risk around capacity and resilience of key roles. I'm very pleased to see that it's such a short statement amongst everything else, because otherwise it could be a huge area. It's really a question of this is what we're not going to do rather than this is what we are going to do.
Yeah, I'm glad you like it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Bob, if I may ask you a question myself, the proposed audit priorities, and this was on what we've been talking about in response to Councillor Chard and some of that Nigel raised as well. But in response to Nigel, you said that if you're taking other work, other audits on, then presumably it's the same as saying before, you would take account of the potential detrimental effect on work that you can't do. In other words, if additional projects you take on during the year, you presumably you do your own assessment of how that's going to impact the work that you're not going to be able to do as a result of that.
Yes, yeah. I mean, obviously we have a small contingency fund, as you're probably aware. So many days a year we'll hold back to sort of say these are for additional work. But unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, the additional work comes in and the contingency dries up very quickly. So yeah, then it's a judgment call then to work out what we can and can't do, and looking at what reviews we've got left and prioritising them to see where best they fit in, whether they can be rolled on to the following financial year or whether they need to be carried out that year. And it could be a lighter touch review as well if needed, just to make sure we can complete so many reviews in a year.
It could be a pilot or someone just to test the waters for future. Okay,
precisely.
But also bearing in mind that there was a lot of work that you weren't able to do over the last 2 years because of the pandemic. Excuse me. Do the priorities for this year take account of those things that you wanted to do over the last 2 years but have not been able to?
Yes, certain areas that have been rolled on are prioritised this year as must-do reviews. So we have got a list within our plan that we plan to hit this year, regardless of capacity. It's going to have to be done. You know, we've rolled 2 or 3 on for more than 1 year, and we want to.
With the shortage of resources you're talking about before, would that have an impact on the ability to do some of those? Other words, if there's particular areas of expertise that are required, and you haven't got that in your team at the moment, does the project take account of that?
They have taken account of that. I mean, I'm quite fortunate at the moment. The vacancy at the end hopefully will be at the lowest end of the team. So training wise, that won't be a big hit for us, because we've got 2 senior auditors who are doing the Institute of Internal Auditors exams as we speak. So they are part qualified, and going forward, hopefully they will qualify. And then obviously we've got the 3rd senior auditor who has already qualified with the fraud certificate this year. So staffing wise, we've got a good core qualified staff, and 2 or 3 members have been on board 12 years plus. So we've got experience of them kind of years of auditing as well.
That's assuring. And also my last question is, in the way you do your assurance mapping and so on, where do the key financial systems such as payroll and creditors come up? I see that revenues and benefits are included for this year. And I'm not saying for a moment payroll and creditors and other key financial systems should be included, but where do they feature in the risk assessment? And I suppose I'm saying, when were they last audited and when will the next be?
They're audited annually. It's the finance review. It's classed as finance review, and then within that finance review, we have a certain number of days, and we roll them across the different finance services. So treasury management will be reviewed. Obviously, as you said, payroll, accounts payable. So it's working out with the Section 151 officer where the areas need to be hit on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, it's a question for me as a new chair, new member of the committee, just trying to find out how things work. Okay, thank you. I think the recommendation is that we note the plan and we ask any questions. Are there any other questions before we resolve this issue? I'm looking at the camera over there.
Sorry, Chair, to say it's actually for you to approve the internal audit charter and the internal audit strategy, not just note it. So it is just.
Oh, sorry, right. But sorry, I beg your pardon. We're asked to approve the charter, the charter and the strategy. So can I have a proposer for that? Councillor Chart. Seconder? Councillor Holliday? Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Righty-ho. The next thing on agenda, item 11, the annual plan for 2022 from Audit Wales. So presumably you're presenting this, Willem, are you?
If I can just introduce again, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. Yes, so today I'd like to welcome my colleague Gwilym Berry from Audit Wales, who is a key link between Denbighshire County Council and Audit Wales, particularly in terms of the performance remit. Today, Gwilym is here and will take you through some of the detail in Audit Wales' annual plan for reviewing Denbighshire over the next 12 months. But before I hand over to Gwilym, just to let the committee know that Gwilym, Bob and I meet on a monthly basis where we update each other about the work plan and fine-tune the arrangements that are needed to be put in place in order for us to carry out our work, which might include scheduling meetings with appropriate staff, sourcing appropriate documents and evidence to support Audit Wales's work, and also preparing for this committee. Part of that work has been us arranging for Audit Wales to visit the senior leadership team back in, I think it was February this year, where they worked together with the CIS and Estin to develop an audit plan for Denbighshire for the forthcoming year. And that's what Gwilym is here to talk to you about today. So thank you. I'll hand over to Gwilym.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you.
Yeah,
Gwilym.
Yeah, thanks, Nicola. Just for the benefit of new members of the council, Audit Wales are the external regulators for all councils in Wales, and we audit all the performance and expenditure of devolved public institutions within Wales. So everything from the fire brigade to the NHS to local government and of course all the Welsh Government itself, the National Assembly for Wales. Each year we produce an annual plan of what we're planning to do for the coming year. Normally it comes to this committee before the start of the financial year, which would make sense, but obviously because of the council elections it's had to be delayed until this meeting. Just in terms of again, this is more for new members, there are essentially three sort of external regulators of local government in Wales. There's ourselves, Audit Wales, and there's also Estyn, which Nicola referred to. Estyn is essentially the inspectorate and regulator for education in Wales, so that they go and inspect schools, and they also look at the arrangements of each council in terms of education. And then you'll hear reference to Care Inspectorate Wales. Essentially what they're looking at are social services in Wales, and also they do a very important job in terms of inspecting every care home and other care provider, which there are many, many hundreds and hundreds of them, and do a very good job in inspecting and making sure everything's okay there. And we work together with Estyn and Care Inspectorate Wales, if for no better reason, to make sure that we're not doing the same piece of work in the same year, so that there's an efficient use of resources, and also where we think they're common areas of concern, we often do joint work together. So the audit plan sets out what we're planning to do in Denbighshire in the coming year. Just again, a bit of background, in addition to what work we're doing just in Denbighshire, we do an awful lot of work at a national level. We produce lots of national reports, which all the Audit Wales staff are involved with. So this audit plan is specifically about what we're going to be doing in Denbighshire. And the bulk of the audit plan is about the financial statements that we do as your external regulator, and that is approximately 2/3 of the work that we undertake each year, doing our work as the statutory function as your external regulator. In addition, we do performance audit work specific to Denbighshire, and we set out our plans for the coming year. We're going to be focusing on unscheduled care, what we've termed arrangements for the council support functions, which will include internal audit, and a number of other things such as HR. And the final area of work is yet to be determined, but it's very likely, subject to the ending of our consultation, to be something that we do across all 22 councils, and we'll be looking at digital strategies, but that is yet to be finally decided, but that's what it's likely to be. The rest of the plan sets out who will be doing the work, and their functions and so on and so forth, which you can all read. As people always ask me about the fees, I thought I'd get in there first. I of course think that the fees are excellent value for money and incredibly cheap for what you get. And surprise, surprise, I've yet to meet an audit committee that agrees with me on that point of view. Since the recession began in 2008-9, though, we have, I believe, tried to improve our efficiency and our effectiveness. The fees back in 2008-9 were 306,000. We're proposing that the fees for this year will be 333,000. So in the space of 14 years, the fees have only increased by 27,000, whereas if we just increased it purely by the rate of inflation, you'd be paying close to £500,000. But we do take trying to keep our costs down as much as possible, and we try very hard to do that in the way that we work. Although I'm here today, a lot of our meetings and interviews with you will be done remotely. So, we don't have people coming to Denbighshire if we can avoid it. although as we come hopefully out of the pandemic, we will be returning more to doing work in Denbighshire in the work we do, because we think the service user perspective is important. And we used to do, before the pandemic, a lot of work where there was that focus on talking to people in Denbighshire about the services being provided, and hopefully we can get back to doing that. Okay, any questions then?
Any questions for Gwilym Berry? Nigel?
Through you, Chair Gwilym, I'm going to have to come back to fees. You wouldn't feel as though you'd earned your crust without at least a question on it. The 3.2% or 3.7% quoted in the report, is that a standard figure of fee increase for all local authorities in your patch, or does that particularly relate to Denbighshire?
Good question. The fees are within various bands, and it's partially to do with size. So, for instance, when we're auditing Cardiff City Council, which is a much larger local authority, the fees do increase because of the size and the complexity. But broadly speaking, we band councils into about 3 groups, depending on whether we think they're high risk, medium risk, or low risk. And Denbighshire is in the lower risk category of those 3. So it's in part a reflection of your performance. Downside to that is, I mean, hopefully this will not happen, but it has happened in the past in Denbighshire about 15 years ago, where we have concerns, serious concerns about a council. We then will undertake additional work. We do have powers to do special inspections. We did do that in Denbighshire about 15 years ago, if my memory serves me right. And the fees would then be a lot higher. But in the average run of things, the fees relate partially to the size of the council, but mainly to the degree of risk that we feel that council presents, and therefore the amount of work that we have to undertake. But if you look at the fees which are on our website, they're very similar across Wales.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. Any other questions from members? No? Well, just a quick question for myself, please. The risks that on page 256, just to clarify, I take it they're generic risks, the risk of management override of control. That's not presumably unique to, that's not specific to Denbighshire, is it?
Yeah, that's correct. Those are the sort of risks that if you go to any council that we'd be listing, so they're not particular to Denbighshire.
No, thank you. That was pretty obvious. I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, thank you. Any other points to be raised? Observations? Okay. So I think the recommendation is that we note the plan and ask question which we've done. So well, I'm not sure what the recommendation is.
The recommendation is for to note and discuss the plan. So unless you had any particular formal recommendation that you wanted to make in terms of asking Audit Wales whether they wanted to change the plan in any way, then I think you can just confirm that you've noted the content of the plan. You don't need a formal vote in respect to that.
Okay. Everybody happy on that? Okay. I think the next item on the agenda is 12, the Government Audit Committee Work Programme, which is from page 267 to 272. Has everybody got a copy of this? Because I think I only had a Welsh copy sent in there. Has everybody got an English one?
Who
wants it?
The report papers pack does include the forward work programme. I've got it in front of me here, okay. Chair. Members will see that the next meeting is on the 27th of July.
Yeah.
And that there are a number of reports that are scheduled to come to that meeting. In terms of your forward work programme, we have today had a suggestion by Paul Witham that there be a standalone report relating to contingencies, and I think Steve Gadd suggested that that should be in the autumn. So we'll note that it's to go in the forward work programme, and we'll work with Steve and his team to find a date. The most appropriate date probably would be the November committee. There's a committee on the 23rd of November.
So Steve's got his hand up, and then he wants to,
Okay.
just, sorry to interrupt you, Gary. I don't know if Steve wants to come in on that.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm just going to confirm November would be fine to put in the, just not September, because there's also the budget report, sorry, which is what I really wanted to come in, that I mentioned earlier on, which isn't on the forward work programme at all. It does, it's a report on the process that comes, well, at least annually to the Governance and Audit Committee, just so you can review that we've got processes in place to make sure that the budget is set in a timely fashion and all the consultations, etc., are done appropriately. So it's to give you a chance to review that. It'll be ready. Obviously, there's been a slight delay because we had a sort of a provisional process approved prior to the elections, and we just need to go back and make sure that everyone's still happy with my proposed process. But I'm happy to bring that to any meeting from July onwards, really, but noting that the agendas are quite packed. So you might want this year to just have one update in the autumn where I just review, give you an update of where we're up to with the budget, but just, yeah, for you to consider really where you want, when you want that update to come.
Any views on? I'm happy with that. And any views on that?
Chair, if I could suggest that if Democratic staff work with Steve in terms of timing, whilst we have a forward work programme, clearly that's indicative. Sometimes things drop out for certain reasons and get deferred, so we'll work on that. The other two issues relate to the information items that you've got later on in the agenda. They will need to come back as substantive reports with a management response. So we will liaise with the relevant officers to make sure that they're scheduled in for July or September, depending on what's the most appropriate.
Nicola, do you have your hand raised? Or?
I did, Chair, thank you. But it was to mention the point that Gary has just made regarding the two papers that you've received from based on Audit Wales reports. We will propose that we bring those to future meetings, as Gary described, so that we can share the management response for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
If I may just ask what members think. On the next meeting on the 27th of July, we've got the number 4 on here is the draft statement of accounts for 2021-22. I mean, presumably this is quite a large document. I know it's intended to have training for audit committee government and audit committee members before then. Will that include something on the statement of accounts, or will there be a separate training session on that? Because it can be quite again, it can on first appears to be quite daunting and challenging, I think, based on my experience of working elsewhere. I just wonder what the plan is for training on that.
We are currently working on training, but take your point that obviously it could be daunting to do a full-blown training session in one hit with you. So it might be a case of breaking the training into 2 sessions. So firstly, an introductory training session into Governance and Audit Committee and your, what your roles, responsibilities would be as members of this committee. And then at a later date, do the full-blown second part. But I've put that out to members to let me know whether they want it all in one go now or 2 hits.
Steve?
Yeah, I just point out that the report that's coming in July, or that's planned to come in July, there's a number of issues that need to be resolved both by Audit Wales and ourselves as far as the statement of accounts of this year due to the inflation and the value of assets. So that's just a warning. They have been delayed over the last 2 years, the statement of accounts. So these are still targets that we're going to bring it to July, and the audit's going to be completed by September. So we will keep you updated on that. The point of the draft statement of accounts is that you're not approving anything when the draft statement of accounts comes to this committee. It's there for you to ask questions. I leave that with you and have an open door policy anytime between July and whenever the final accounts come. I'm happy to answer any questions. And then obviously in the final accounts, that's the presentation of the final accounts in September, or as they were in November last year. That's the important meeting. So I guess what I'm saying there is that if you want some training specifically on the statement of accounts, I guess that doesn't have to necessarily be before the July meeting, but does need to be before the September meeting. That still doesn't give us much time. But the other training you do need going forward is the Treasury Management report that comes here, and we will arrange that with our Treasury Management consultants who are Arling Close, and they will arrange a training session. Now that I know who's on this committee, I'll arrange that in the next couple of weeks. It won't be in the next couple of weeks, but I'll arrange for them to start bringing that together for you.
Thank you, Steve. I think it's quite useful. For those who are new, like myself, to the committee, I think any training we can get is really important. I think it's easy to look at things like treasury management and I don't quite understand that. But I mean, I think I'm old enough to remember about 20 years ago, there were major problems with treasury management, and some councils had major financial problems as a result of not handling that properly. So thank you for that. Just on the programme, what's the annual RIPA report, please?
That's the Regulation of Investigatory Procedures Act. It's effectively an annual report we bring in terms of surveillance activity that the council may have carried out. We do very little, a lot less than we used to. Just briefly, councillors are authorised to carry out what's called directed surveillance, which is covert surveillance for the prevention detection of crime or disorder. The Protection of Freedoms Act restricted the ways in which councils could undertake those activities, but we do, under the Code of Practice issued by the Home Office, bring a report every year. Sometimes it's a nil report, but we do bring a report every year.
So the council's point of view, it'd be such things as any investigative work done, trading standards, fraud investigation, etc.
Yes.
Charge, sorry.
Oh yeah. Dear all, I was just wondering, I only went on this committee 12 months ago when one of my party members became the chair of the council. So since then, and the previous chair of the committee was asking about training. So I am desperate. I've picked up a lot and I'm okay on accounts and things, but I would like a short training session before the July meeting. And then maybe, as Steve Scad said, or was it Bob, one further on for the accounts. Okay.
I can confirm.
But that's just, okay, Gary, that's what I just feel. Okay.
I can confirm that the training will be provided. We had hoped to provide training before the first meeting of the committee, but we didn't actually know all the members of the committee until relatively recently. So we will be organising training.
Anything else on the governance? Sorry, Councillor Chard, you get your hand up again?
I was putting my thumb up to thank Gary. Okay.
Okay. Is there any other issues on the programme, Paul?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, just touching on the training issue. Historically, this committee has periodically had training for changes of members and new members on both the statement of accounts and treasury management. It's a double hit that they're both on the July agenda. And I wouldn't for 1 minute think that it would be possible to have training on both before then. But in any case, in my own personal view, I think that because there's only one elected member and myself who were here previously on this committee, more importantly than either of those topics is that we have a general, this is what you do in Denbighshire, or this is the way Denbighshire does things, before any details of explaining the statement of accounts and so on. That would be my preference. If that would mean that perhaps Treasury Management goes to the September meeting to delay training on that, that's another question. But I think for those two specific points, detailed training and the timing in the agenda are in some ways inextricably linked. But overarching all those, in my view, is that because so many of us are new, or so many of you are new, that to me takes priority, but that's a personal view. As far as the work programme itself is concerned, on page 14, I did raise at the beginning this question of the updates on commissioning older people's care home placements. And I wouldn't want that one to fall off the edge and be overlooked. And the other thing was in the report that we've just had from Audit Wales, on pages 263 and 264, there is their timetable, which provides indicative dates of their reports being finalised. And I'm assuming that at the appropriate time, sorry, colleagues, those two will fall into the forward work programme of this committee.
Yes, any reports produced by Audit Wales would come to this committee. And what I'd suggest is that colleagues liaise that when we've got indicative dates, they go in the forward work programme. If they have to slip a meeting or two, depending on capacity of both the committee and or the completion of the work, then that's fine. But they can at least be identified at an approximate date in the programme so they don't get lost.
Just taking what Paul said, I think you were suggesting that the Treasury Management update report be deferred. Is that a specific recommendation, Paul?
No, it's not a specific recommendation, Chair. It's just that historically, those are the two that members have occasionally struggled with. If they require training, I think it's a double whammy to have them both for the next meeting. That's all.
Steve?
Yeah, just on the Treasury Management report, I mean, obviously the draft statement of accounts will come when it's ready, as early as possible. That they are both backward-looking reports, so the later that you receive them, the less timely the information is. So I would recommend trying to keep them on the July agenda. Sorry. There's two parts to the Treasury Management report, and it's for your review and information. As I say, it's a bit like reporting activity for the previous year. So as far as decision making wise, there is not, there's no decisions to make. You might want to recommend improvements or notice things you're concerned about, but actually the report itself is about the performance of the previous year. So that's what we'll be bringing. I can obviously tailor the report to make sure that we have, and my presentation to the committee, that actually will go through some of the basics with you and to highlight the things that you need to look at. So I can hopefully make it more straightforward. If full training is not done prior to the meeting, I'd be loath to sort of push it further on in the year.
I suspected you might say that. I suggest then that the training that we have, that it does include Treasury Management and the statement of accounts, but the basics, if you like.
I think, sorry, Chair, can I just come back? A compromise might be that I do some training. If I talk to Bob and I can obviously do a slim down training based on what you need to know to approve those reports, and then perhaps arrange the more full Arling Close training that you can go into in depth about questions of what scenario analysis and all sorts of things with Arling Close, because they're our Treasury Management experts, but I can cover the details perhaps with you prior to the meeting.
That seems very sensible. Members, are you okay with that suggestion? It's all for us. Okay. I'm not sure there's a specific recommendation with this. Okay, just a note. So, okay, thank you. Steve, you still have your hand up, is that?
Yeah, apologies. I'll take it down.
Okay, and So it takes us to agenda items 13 and 14. 13, delivering sustained improvement report, and 14, springing forward report, which are both Audit Wales reports. Now, I understand these are information reports. Gary, I'm not quite sure what we normally do with these. It's just saying that there's further reports going to come up in the future. Is that right?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. These reports have been relatively recently published, and the way that we do things with Denbighshire is that the reports are discussed by the Governance and Audit Committee when officers have had time to agree an action plan about what they're going to do about the recommendations. So they've just been tabled for information for today, giving more opportunities to read them. And they'll be on the agenda, as I understand it, for a future Governance and Audit Committee, either the next one or the one after that.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you.
They're there to make sure that you've got early sight of them.
Yeah.
You've got a chance to read and digest them. And then when the substantive item comes back with an action plan, you'll get this report plus the action plan at the same time.
Okay, thank you. Members, are there anything you want to raise on these two information reports? No? I keep looking over there. I should be looking over there. The camera's over there. Forgive me. I'm getting used to the technology eventually. Okay. Just one thing from me, Gwilym. I did go through the reports. I didn't realise there were information reports. I think on the delivering sustained improvement, you talk somewhere about the Verto contract. I understood I was looking through the minutes of the previous audit committee. I think the contract has been signed. I don't know if that has any bearing on that. So I don't really know what I'm talking about there. I'm just trying to make links there.
If I can come in there, Chair, the Verto is a performance management system that we use in the council in order. It's a system in which we build all of our service plans and the corporate plan and the indicators, measures, activities and projects that we monitor in order to track our progress against delivering against our plans. So that is a system that we use to store that information, to export information for committees, and that our colleagues across the council, it's a repository for them to provide us with information as well.
I think at the previous audit, at the previous Government Audit Committee, Councillor Holland raised whether it had been signed, and I think there's something about it being reconfigured. And I see Gwilym in it said to consider whether the new Verto contract allows it to make the system more user friendly. I just wondered if your issue there and what was talked about at the last audit committee, if they're linked in some way, it's just to make the officers aware of that.
I think the best way forward is to wait for the action plan, and then we can discuss it in the round at a future meeting.
Okay, thank you. I've got nothing else. No other matters on these reports? I think that's the end of the agenda. So nothing else wants to raise under any other business?
We don't do any other business. We're not technically legally allowed to do any other business.
Sorry, right. Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much. Thanks for the officers for your sharing and for your opinions. Thanks for your help and Gwilym, thank you for presenting as well. Thank you for your guidance. Thank you all. And thank you all for attending and for your contributions. See you at the next meeting, which is on the 27th of July. Thank you very much.